I grew up with the film adaptation of the Michael Crichton story. John Hammond's signature spared no expense quotes. Dr. Alan Grant's claw, Dr. Ellie Sattler's dinosaur dropping search, their two faces beautifully gawking at the brachiosauruses traveling in herds, and Dr. Ian Malcolm saying, life, finds a way. Significantly, people my parents, mine, and the latest two generations of today wouldn't know about or most likely be as interested in dinosaurs or other prehistoric animals without the decades of dedication from scientists and paleoartists. Generally, only the bones of these creatures remain, but because of paleoartists' work in books, movies, and museums, most people have a at least semi-accurate impression of what these creatures look like. Many paleoartists, including Georges Cuvier, Gideon Mantell, John Martin, Henry Ward, Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins, Charles R. Knight, and dozens more, have worked and continue to work hard to bring the visuals of the ancient world to the present. As it sounds, the word paleoart is a portmanteau of paleo, meaning ancient, from paleontology, the study of ancient life, and art. This word was notably coined by Mark Hallett in 1987 and showed up in his published work, The Scientific Approach of the Art in Bringing Dinosaurs Back to Life, from Dinosaurs Past and Present, Volume 1. Hallett stressed the importance of the cooperative effort between artists, paleontologists, and other specialists in gaining access to information for generating accurate, realistic restorations of extinct animals and their environments. Paleoart is, of course, not only about dinosaurs. There's art depicting every time from the Hadean, the origin of the Earth, though there isn't biology yet, to the Phanerozoic, which is our current eon. The biological aspects generally range from the Cambrian to the current Quaternary period, specifically ending around the Pleistocene epoch with Ice Age mammals. My name is Renee Whitehouse. You're listening to Detours in Archaeology. Let's take a detour. Welcome to Jurassic Art. Paleoart has evolved significantly since its inception in the 15th to 16th centuries. Initially, scientists and artists were often the same people, but the field later saw an emergence of specialized paleoartists. Marine mammals, particularly whales, were among the first subjects of paleoart in the 17th century. Paleoart emerged as a distinct genre of art with an unambiguous scientific basis around the beginning of the 19th century, dovetailing with the emergence of paleontology as a distinct scientific discipline. These early paleoartists restored fossil material, musculature, life appearance, and habitat of prehistoric animals based on the limited scientific understanding of the day. Painting and sculptures from the mid-1800s, such as the landmark Crystal Palace dinosaur sculptures displayed in London, propelled paleontology into the public eye. Paleoart developed in scope and accuracy alongside paleontology, with classic paleoart coming on the heels of the rapid increase in dinosaur discoveries resulting from the opening of the American frontier in the 19th century. Visionaries such as Charles R. Knight brought dinosaurs to life with dynamic depictions in the early 1900s. Since paleontology knowledge and public perception of the field have changed dramatically since the earliest attempts at reconstructing prehistory, paleoart as a discipline has consequently changed over time as well. This has led to difficulties in creating a shared definition of the term. In the ongoing pursuit of scientific accuracy, the distinction between true paleoart and paleoimagery has become a focal point within the discipline. Some scholars emphasize the necessity of delineating these terms, with paleoimagery encompassing a wider array of visuals influenced by paleontological concepts, but not necessarily bound by scientific precision. As highlighted by Anson, Fernandez, and Ramos in 2015, this differentiation is crucial. A proposed definition designates paleoartists as individuals who engage in crafting original skeletal reconstructions or restorations of prehistoric creatures using accepted methodologies. This definition as articulated by Debu and Debu in 2012, aims to clarify the roles and responsibilities of paleoartists in ensuring accuracy of their representations of ancient life forms. Moreover, it is acknowledged that a comprehensive understanding of paleoart necessitates an element of subjectivity. Each artist brings forth unique styles, preferences, and interpretations that inevitably influence their artistic choices alongside the overarching objective of maintaining scientific fidelity. The interplay between these subjective elements and the pursuit of accuracy underscores the nuanced nature of paleoart as a creative and scientific endeavor. The Society of Vertebrate Paleontology, or SVP, has defined paleoart as the scientific or naturalistic rendering of paleontological subject matter pertaining to vertebrate fossils, a definition considered unacceptable by some for its exclusion of non-vertebrate subject matter. But in paleoart, there are three essential elements defined by paleoartist Mark Whitten. These elements are crucial for creating accurate representations of prehistoric life. 1. Bound by scientific data. Paleoart must be based on scientific evidence and data related to the organisms being depicted. It is important to ensure that the artwork aligns with what is known through research and study. 2. Involving biologically informed restoration. When there are gaps in the data, paleoartists use biological knowledge to make informed restorations. This process helps fill in missing information and creates a more complete depiction of extinct organisms. And 3. Relating to extinct organisms. Paleoart specifically focuses on portraying organisms that are no longer present today. It captures these creatures in their prehistoric environments, bringing them back to life through art. By following these guidelines, paleoartists can create engaging and scientifically accurate depictions of ancient life forms, bridging the gap between the past and the present. As the 20th century progressed, paleoart evolved to portray vibrant ecosystems and landscapes. The transformative dinosaur renaissance, spanning the 1960s to the 1980s, revitalized dinosaur art, leaving an indelible mark on the history by also establishing the foundation for paleoart historiography. This period emphasized the integration of artistic processes in paleontology that sparked discussions about the field's historical legacy. Today, paleoart continues to be a vital tool in conveying scientific knowledge through engaging museum exhibitions and educational displays. The first pictorial representation of a scene from deep time that was based on fossil evidence was done by geologist Henri de la Blèche in 1930. The piece Dura Antiquitor, a more ancient Dorset, based on the many marine fossils found by Mary Awning. As discussed in the Paleoartist Handbook by Whitten and Paleoart Visions of the Prehistoric Past, the practice of paleoart is a visual tradition originating in the 1800s. However, what is extremely interesting to look at are the pieces of proto-paleoart, which can be dated back at least 2,500 years ago. Even though the scientifically based fossil work in this early period is less concrete, this practice later reached a wonderful amount of people in the Middle Ages, or the medieval period, because of the volumes of compendiums on the subject of incredible and mythical animals, the Bestiarium Vocabulum, or bestiaries. The only way we have a world in which Jurassic Park exists is because of paleontologists, paleoartists, and the authors and artists of bestiaries and hundreds of years of scientific study into the fascinating world of fossils and biology, at least partly inspired by those crazy creatures that we found in those bestiaries. When we look at the fossil hunting of today, we seem to be having a new fossil golden age. Finding new species and making new connections to what prehistoric animals look like and how they may have lived. Again, with the hard work of scientists around the world, we now have evidence of giant swimming Spinosaurus, the feathered theropod dinosaurs, the skin of unfeathered dinosaurs that are mummified, a baby dino preserved with soft tissue in amber, and even how prehistoric animals' blood worked. A lot of these articles are very new, and some present ideas that are still being argued over, but that's good. A healthy discourse and exchanging of ideas introduces more in-depth knowledge and thus changes ideas of the Earth's past and how we got to where we are now. But before we got to where we are now, we did have an era that is regarded as a paleontological renaissance, or the dinosaur renaissance, from the late 60s through the 90s, when the general human finally appreciated that dinosaurs were living, alert, warm-blooded animals, although that is still being argued, that evolved into birds, instead of the slow, lumbering, Hollywood-style monsters that just died out due to laziness. Some of the species of animals that were found during this time were the dinosaurs Dilophosaurus, which is the theropod dinosaur that spits acid in the movies, and the Deinonychus, which the velociraptors in the Jurassic Park movie and book were originally based on. While we have moved past these ideas and visualizations now, worldwide work in continent-wide Africa, China, Mongolia, Myanmar, Pakistan, the Americas, etc. has shaped how we look at Proto-Triassic animals, dinosaurs and their contemporaries, all animals otherwise, as well as phylogenetic trees and evolution itself. This moves our planetary understanding of the past forward into connecting with the living creatures that evolved from them. While found around a century before the dinosaur renaissance, the well-known Archaeopteryx fossil skeleton found in southern Germany was in an area that was once an archipelago of islands in a shallow tropical sea in the late Jurassic period. While agreed that this is a transitional fossil, what should be more appreciated is the feathers alone. How well the stone was preserved initially and protected by scientists through time. Many times in history, finds such as this are never shown, or even worse, destroyed, because they're controversial. We were and are therefore very lucky to have this find still around. In a way, this links to the old knowledge of creatures. Dragons, unicorns, the kraken, leviathan, chimera, etc. were known to be in the world, dangerous or magnanimous beings created by the gods or God to keep the old world interesting, as they were believed to be completely real. What is evident in much of the new research is how much it is obvious that these creatures from the prehistoric world are connected with living animals. According to Witten, there are recommended scientific guidelines that must be followed to be able to classify a piece of art in this genre. These requirements include the creature's geochronology, its place in time, paleobiogeography, location in the ancient past, a skeletal or body shape reference, and, if possible, an understanding of the organism's ontogeny, the origination and development of the organism from fertilization or egg to the adult, functional morphology, the shape that it takes, and phylogeny, the place where it would sit on the phylogenetic tree or the evolutionary tree. I would never argue that geese or swans aren't vicious. They seem to be connecting with their distant ancestors and their current relatives in Australia, like the cassowary. As an example of how this species can act today, the female half of a mating pair that the Featherdale Wildlife Park had in captivity in 2010, while I just happened to be visiting, was so violent towards the male and in general are extremely territorial, that they had to keep them separate when not in heat. Otherwise, the larger female cassowary would attack the male to keep him out of her territory. This isn't only a practice found in birds either. Female jaguars in the Americas keep watch over around 9 to 15 square miles, with male territorial areas overlapping with the various territories of local females. Obviously, none of these are monsters or skeletons or rocks. They were living animals. There are lots of different kinds of depictions, whether it's just skeletal or the 1800s restorations that are not accurate for what we now know, or size comparisons to humans or animals of today, or just showing them living life or how their behavior might have been. And you don't just have illustrations. The world won't forget the sculptures at the Crystal Palace, made by Benjamin Waterhouse Hawkins in the 1850s. They're still there, by the way. or all the articulated fossils or casts at almost every natural history museum. The transition from the more reptilian depictions of dinosaurs to the updated taxonomy models marked a significant evolution in Paleoart. The Crystal Palace models, despite their inaccuracies by modern standards, played a crucial role in advancing Paleoart as both a serious academic pursuit and a means of engaging the public. These dinosaur models at the Crystal Palace were groundbreaking in their merchandising, being sold as postcards, guidebooks, and replicas to a wide audience. The latter part of the 1800s witnessed a notable shift towards the scientific restorations of prehistoric life in academic works and paintings. For instance, the publication of Louis Figuier's La Terre avant le déluge in 1863 showcased a series of Paleoart pieces illustrating life across different eras. Illustrated by Édouard Rieu, these works featuring dinosaurs and other ancient creatures based on Owen's interpretations set a standard for future academic publications depicting prehistoric life. As I mentioned, these art pieces and scientific discoveries were not only of dinosaurs, and I am a bit sorry for mostly focusing on them up to now, but there are mammoth reconstructions based on frozen carcass found in Siberia in 1805. There's a ton of marine paleoart showing everything from sponges, trilobites, interesting squids, feather stars, snails, sharks, and other fish, all from different periods because the ocean, of course, was around much longer than land. But even looking just at the land, there's a ton of different paleoart that can vary from the Nebraska savanna in the late Oligocene to early Miocene, from 24.8 to 20.6 million years ago, over to the Alaskan mammoth steppe of the late Pleistocene, which was only 20 to 14,000 years ago. This is important to remember because paleoart and fossil work has been recorded through paintings, carvings, and sculptures going back to ancient Greece or before. Although even calling it proto-paleoart is a stretch because it wasn't likely a purposeful scientific study where a Corinthian vase painted sometime between 560 and 540 BCE is thought to be a depiction of an observed fossil skull. It was known as the monster of Troy, who was fought by Heracles, and its head was said to resemble the skull of an extinct species of giraffid, the Samotherium, whose name translates to beast of Samos, which does kind of make an automatic connection whether intended or not. In two different versions of the story, Heracles in one rescued Princess Hesione of Troy from the Certus, or sea monster. The hero plies the monster with a volley of arrows from his bow. The Certus is depicted as a serpentine beast with a gaping maw and a lot of jagged teeth. Or, in another one, Heracles battles the Trojan Certus without a princess to be seen. The hero is naked and wields a fishhook in one hand. The monster is depicted more as a shark-like beast with a spiny back and undulating tail, and several sea creatures surround it: a seal, two dolphins, and an octopus. The much more commonly passed around myth about fossils being connected to mythology would have to be the Cyclops, with the big hole in the middle of the skull being the nostril rather than an eye. As Witten and other researchers point out, these ideas have never been substantiated in the academic community, with them just making an appearance in general popular culture, though that doesn't mean we can rule it out completely. Even if the ancient historical writings or drawings were completely incorrect in what the original fossils showed, the work and some scientific or just artistic thought were put into the depictions and the stories that were shared with the populace. As we've already seen, the medieval practice of writing and illustrating bestiaries was not the first example of drawing creatures that humans did not understand. It does, however, appear to be one of the earliest examples of paleoart using both zoology and archaeozoology, or zooarchaeology, the science of how humans and animals interacted and how they played a role in our culture, based on the biology of creatures in the past or living in that particular present. If someone has played Dungeons & Dragons or Pathfinder or one of the other myriad games, and or have spent time looking through the monster manuals, that someone has encountered a bestiary. Within those connections, game masters and players alike are given descriptions of some of the backstories of the creatures, along with where they are found, how they typically act, a list of attacks, strengths and weaknesses, and their stats next to an illustration. That means that someone in that universe either comprised an amazing collection of descriptions and adventures by people who encountered them, or a scholar went out into their habitat and made a written documentary. Both have been done in our universe or plane of existence, so neither is that strange. But as stated in the previous section, Witten's list of recommendations is followed extremely closely. Even though it's based on animals that live in a fictional world, it could still count as Paleoart. Sort of. Even since most of the creatures that are still alive, and especially for those that adventurers have to wait till level 20 to fight, many do harken back to the ancient past of their world. Moving towards the reality of medieval bestiaries, these illustrated compendiums included animals, plants, and even rocks, though not fossils, and seem to have inspired the backstory aspect of our current bestiaries by including a moral, mostly relating to Christianity and God in some way. But while more commonly associated with the medieval monks in Europe, there has at least one found in China. It is not clear who the author was, and was likely a summarized compilation of the researched achievements of the previous dynasty scholars, but it has been attributed to the ancient Emperor Yu the Great, the first emperor of the Xia dynasty. Several academics agree that it was more of a living document, with updates being made over the centuries due to the inclusion of history of the Xia dynasty that hadn't happened when it was thought to be originally written in the 14th century BCE. It was named Guideways Through Mountains and Seas, Shan Hai Jing, or Classic of Mountains and Seas, which described and or illustrated stories from explorers, wizards, and alchemists, many Chinese myths, and more than 100 states, 550 mountains, 300 waterways, and the geography, terroir, and natural products of these states. According to the statistics of the animals in the Shanhai Jing, there are as many as 277 species within its 18 volumes, including 5 volumes of Shangjing, 8 volumes of Haijing, 4 volumes of Dahuanjing, and 1 volume of Haijingjing, and a total of about 31,000 words. Some pages of the Volume 5 from the Classic of Mountains and Seas showed up in the Ming Dynasty, while illustrations of the 9-headed phoenix came from the Qing Dynasty. There was also an illustration of Nuwa. Another illustration had the 9-tailed fox, who is a companion of the Queen Mother of the West, and plate LXI, or 61, a wood block depicting Bing Yi, also known as Hebo, is being pulled in a cart by 2 dragons. It was also created in China during the Ming Dynasty by Jian Yinghao. The first bestiary that historians have studied is from the tradition of ancient Greece, with its popularity dating back to the 2nd century Christian Greek volume called the Physiologus. Around the year 400 CE, the Physiologus was translated into Latin from the original Greek, which then allowed it to later be translated into at least 6 other languages for readers across Europe and the Middle East. Like in the Chinese Shanhai Jing, Physiologus was a compilation of descriptions of animals, plants, and sometimes the land itself, allegorical stories, and tales of morality. This compendium was not as objective or directly nature-based as either Pliny the Elder's Naturalis Historia or Aristotle's De Animalium, in which he sets up the Scala Naturae. As Curley states in 1979, the Physiologus was never intended to be a treatise on natural history, nor did the word ever simply mean the naturalist as we understand the term today, but one who interpreted metaphysically, morally, and finally mystically the transcendent significance of the natural world. Another similarity to the Chinese Shanhai Jing is that the original author is unknown, but it was probably collected through time in Alexandria due to its similarities with the works of Titus Flavius Clemens, aka Clement of Alexandria, who lived in the 1st and early 2nd centuries. Over the centuries, the original texts have been translated multiple times into many different languages, with more illustrations being added. One such translation is called the Bern Physiologus, which was a 9th century illuminated copy of the Latin translation, and was probably produced at Reims between 825 to 850 CE. There are so many others that came out in different centuries, such as the Aberdeen Bestiary in the 12th century, or the Ashmole Bestiary in 1511 from England, the Rochester Bestiary in the 13th century, the Oxford Bestiary, or the Harley manuscript. Because bestiaries are thought to be connected to the early works of fossils, the idea of the lindworm, a very famous dragon and statue that still stands in Klagenfurt, Austria, by Ulrich Wolfgang around 1590. According to an Austrian tale from the 13th century, the lindworm lived near Klagenfurt, and its presence was blamed for flooding along the river. A duke offered a reward to anyone who would capture it. Some young men decided to use a bull as bait and tied it to a chain. When the lindworm swallowed the bull, it was hooked like a fish, and then all the young men ran in and subsequently killed it. There are, of course, different versions, but this is the one from Klagenfurt, Austria. The idea of the lindworm was probably conceived in writings of the time that could have been partially based on a skull found in a mine or gravel pit near Klagenfurt in 1335 of Coleodonta antiquitatis, the woolly rhinoceros, as a basis for the head, which remains on display today. The German textbook Mundanus Subterraneus by Athanasius Kircher in 1678 features many illustrations of giant humans and dragons that may have been informed by fossil finds of the day, many of which came from explored quarries and caves. Some of these creatures may have been based on the bones of large Pleistocene mammals common to European caves, while others may have been dinosaurs going back even further, and still others may have been based on the fossils of the plesiosaurs. Like the mammal Cyclops, however, it's difficult to know for sure where ideas arose from. According to some researchers, the change from the typical dragon artwork of this time, which was shown to have the classically slender serpentine dragon shape in lieu of a barrel-like body and paddle-like wings, has been thought to have been the arrival of a new source of information, such as the speculated discovery of plesiosaur fossils in quarries of the Swabia region of Bavaria. One of the earliest artistic rendering was in a letter concerning the discovery of the plesiosaurus in 1823 by Mary Awning. But of course, even now, we have so many different plesiosaur fossils from many countries around the world, including all over the continental United States and Canada, because of the Western Interior Seaway, which was a large inland sea that split the continent of North America into two landmasses for 34 million years. What can we learn from these mistakes, though? In the 18th century, skeletal reconstructions of the unicorn are thought to have been inspired by the discovery of what was later shown to be a chimera made by Ice Age mammoth and rhinoceros bones that were found in a cave near Quedlinburg, Germany in 1663. These artworks are of an uncertain origin and may have been created by Otto von Guericke, the German naturalist who first described the unicorn remains in his writing, or Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, the author who published the image posthumously in 1749, which is the oldest known illustration of a fossil skeleton. As written by Leibniz, quote, "The horn together with the head, several ribs, dorsal vertebrae, and bones were brought to the town's serene abbess," unquote. Leibniz, lacking the ability to personally engage in fieldwork, placed his trust in eyewitnesses from the area. Consequently, he found himself dependent on the observations of those around him, leading him to delve into armchair speculation. And if you look through different bestiaries, there are a lot of different representations of what a unicorn looked like. It is all up to interpretation. The idea of the unicorn already existed in medieval and older sources, but that could be a whole extra book. While unicorns themselves are an extreme example of what people can build out of bones, especially to fool people who don't know better, the lesson we can learn is to take a scientific eye and some healthy skepticism to what we are looking at. Science moves forward, ideas change, and that's the wonderful thing about intellectual progress. We look back at ancient and medieval bestiaries as papers, illustrations, and sculptures up through the 19th and 20th centuries up to today and see we made mistakes. But if we're only looking at one portion, we don't see a whole picture. Bestiaries of any time or place were not perfect. In fact, far from it. But we continue to try, to improve, to learn more. Life finds a way, and authors and artists have long sought to share that experience. The vases to carvings to the illuminated manuscripts not only served as a compendium, but also as symbolic representations deeply intertwined with mythological and religious beliefs. The reflexive topic demonstrates how today's society has continued to look at unknown creatures in our world and their place in scientific progress. At first, these animals were made from magic or myths of monsters or demons, but with time, advances in study, and open-mindedness, the work shows that it's the natural laws that govern us all, even if we don't understand them, even if we don't know them. Paleoart plays a significant role in communicating scientific understanding of prehistoric life to both researchers and the public's understanding of extinct species, particularly dinosaurs. It combines scientific evidence with creative interpretation, influencing both scientific ideas and public perception. What's important is that Paleoart evolves alongside scientific discoveries, with recent findings on feathered dinosaurs offering new creative possibilities while also constraining artistic license. The field bridges art and science, reflecting the state of paleontological knowledge at the time of creation and revealing the human story behind interpreting fragmentary remains. Artists of today can draw inspiration from the intricate illustrations and fantastical descriptions found in bestiaries, continuing the legend of bringing ancient creatures to life through art. By exploring the connections between Paleoart and bestiaries, we gain a profound appreciation for how the art has power to transcend time and connect us with our past in meaningful ways. While Paleoart enhances visitor understanding in exhibitions, curators must carefully evaluate its selection and application to avoid misleading interpretations. As paleontology advances, paleoartists will continue to face the challenge of incorporating new scientific information while creating engaging visual representations of prehistoric life. Some additional information. One thing that I really do want to share. If I tell people I'm an archaeologist, 8 to 9 times out of 10, someone will ask, do you dig up dinosaurs? Or what's your favorite dinosaur? They'll ask me a question about dinosaurs. And yes, obviously, I love dinosaurs. I always have. But paleontology is not connected to archaeology at all. Archaeologists are not designated to study dinosaurs. Paleontology is a subset of either biology or geology, depending on the university, and archaeology is a subset of anthropology, the study of human culture. Archaeology, which is the study of ancient human culture, is also filed under the BA system, usually, rather than the BS. So Bachelor's of Arts, rather Bachelor's of Science, and same with MA and MS. But again, it varies depending on the university and the country. But for me, I just love to study ancient life in all of its forms. Like other topics that I've started to jump into, there is so much more. It could be an entire book because a lot of people have written on it already. So I hope that I have left someone with the idea just to type out Paleoart or bestiaries into Google Scholar for themselves. There are a lot of people on Twitter or Instagram that do Paleoart. There are a few YouTube channels that I really like, PBS Eons and Your Dinosaurs Are Wrong or YDAW. And a wonderful podcast I know that I listen to all the time is I Know Dino. They're all very educational and entertaining. And while I love rewatching Jurassic Park, it doesn't inspire me as much as these YouTube channels do at this point in my life. Yes, reading scientific journals as direct sources is very useful for the information, but some light viewing shouldn't be sneered at. Just follow the citations of the creator's sources to get more of a background. And same with this podcast as well. Head over to my website via the description and you can read along with this podcast. You'll get some extra information, get citations and additional reading, and you'll get so many of the illustrations that I just threw out there and so many more that I didn't even mention. Specifically, for more about Paleoart and its evolution, I watched an illustrated history of dinosaurs. This is kind of what the topic of this article was going to be before I watched it, so I changed up the topic a bit. And of course, AI can create its own crazy bestiary creatures just for fun, but that certainly takes our understanding of the real natural world backwards. So just be careful of really looking at anything that could be made with AI. Like the cover art of this episode, it is a bird dragon thing that I made with AI. I would like to thank everyone for listening to this episode of Detours in Archaeology. Welcome to Jurassic Art. And if you enjoyed today, please take a minute to rate and review this podcast. I really appreciate it. It just helped it to reach more people. And hey, share it with a friend who might like it. Share it with friends that like dinosaurs. If you end up listening to one of the other podcasts that I mentioned, tell them I sent you. They won't know who I am, but you can do it anyway. For this episode, especially want to apologize for any mispronunciations of names or words, especially any of the Chinese. I am so sorry. I do not know what tones were correct in those cases, and I hope that I didn't say something completely insulting or just ridiculous. Please correct me by letting me know in a comment on this podcast, wherever you're listening to it, or you can send me an email at detoursinarchaeology@gmail.com, or head over to my website and leave a comment on that post at detoursinarchaeology.com. If you want to show me a little bit of support other than rating and reviewing, you can head over to my Patreon and subscribe. You can join at the paid levels or you can join for free. Either way, you'll get extra goodies on my off weeks. Those usually entail bloopers or extra information or extra stories that I had to cut out because the episode was going too long. For the fun fact this week, I got another one from BBC Science Focus that platypuses sweat milk. This is because they don't have teeth, so milk appears as sweat on a platypus, but it's an aquatic mammal, so it doesn't actually sweat at all. Another animal that creates milk that you wouldn't think would do so are pigeons. Pigeons are much more fascinating than I ever gave them credit for before. I learned it all from the Ologies podcast hosted by Ali Ward, and the episode was Columbidology with Rosemary Musco, and I'm hoping I'm saying that right as well. Until next time, keep taking those detours. Thanks again.